This was your last collaboration with him. Did you feel like your partnership had run its course?
No, I wasn't certain. I felt we might work again. What I did feel was that this was going to be the last of the Poe films. This was the other thing that differed, that made Tomb of Lygia different from the others. I was working on certain theories, and one of them that was that Poe was working with the unconscious mind, and the unconscious mind does not have direct contact with the reality. It's dependent upon the information it gets from the eyes, the ears, the nose, and so forth. And I wanted the artificiality of a studio, and I wanted to stay away from sunlight. I used a lot of fog, I shot at night, and so forth. And frankly, I got so bored with my own theory that on Tomb of Lygia, I deliberately, and I talked to Bob about this, I said, we're going out into the English countryside, we're going away for at least a portion of the picture into natural interiors, and we're going to use sunlight, which is the only time I ever used it, because my own theories were that sunlight was wrong, but I just felt I had to change it.
Well, after you made this film, interesting things happened with Vincent Price and the Poe pictures. Vincent Price made a movie called Witchfinder General, released in the States as The Conqueror Worm, directed by a young director named Michael Reeves. And when you saw this film, and I understand that you were very impressed with Michael Reeves as a filmmaker, did you see things in Vincent that you didn't realize he could do, and did it really make you want to work with him again and push him in new directions?
I was impressed with what Vincent was doing. Michael Reeves, from what Vincent told me and from other people told me, fought with Vincent all the way through the picture to bring out different dimensions, and I think it ultimately did work. Vincent and I had gotten along so well together. We didn't work that way, but Michael Reeves was a very bright, very talented young director who would have had, I believe he committed suicide.
It was a miscalculation of alcohol and barbiturates.
I shouldn't smile.
Actually, I think it was an antidepressant medication that he was taking, and he just went out and partied a little too much.
That is probably correct. It's just what I've heard. You know, rumors get around, but he died young. I think he was a very talented director and would have had a great career.
And the other thing I was interested in asking you about was a film that AIP released called Spirits of the Dead, which had Poe stories adapted by Louis Malle and Roger Vadim and Federico Fellini. I think Fellini's episode is astonishing, and I just wanted to know what you thought of those films.
Actually, I never saw that film. I wish I had, because I heard it was very interesting.
It's an amazing movie. That's all the questions that I have for Roger about Vincent Price and Edgar Allan Poe. Shall we take a couple of questions from the audience?
Sure, we can take a few.
Okay.
You have a question? Right up here.
First, thanks for coming to see us. My question is, were there any scripts, screenplays that you wanted to do with Vincent Price, but were never able to get around to?
Tim, would you mind repeating the question?
Yes, he wanted to know if there were any scripts that came in for Vincent Price that you wanted to do, but didn't end up doing.
There were no scripts that came in. There was an unfinished novel by Poe called The Narrative of A. Gordon Pym that I was interested in doing. It was a completely different style of story, but by that time I moved away from the Poe pictures and just did not get around to doing it.
Yes, right there.
Hi, hello, Mr. Corman.
Yeah.
Oh, I just want to thank you for making my childhood very happy. Your movies just made my childhood and my friends, my mother and my father. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
I too would like to say thank you for all you've done for American cinema. But wanted to ask you if you and Vincent talked about art or the other things that he was interested in, like portraiture when you were working on Usher with him and they had all those great portraits. Any memories
we did, because I picked the paintings, and Bert Schoenberg, who did the paintings, was a friend of mine and was sort of a far out, somewhere between the beatnik and hippie style, and had a very strange, weird style. And Vincent loved Bert's paintings for Usher. Bert had then moved to New York, and on the Bit and the Pendulum, I had a more traditional painter paint one painting. I think it was supposed to be of one of Vincent's ancestors, and I was a little bit disappointed with it because it was too much of a standard painting. And Vincent came up to me and said exactly the same thing, that he had liked Bert's paintings for Usher better than the painting we had on the Bit and the Pendulum. Vincent was a great critic and lecturer on films, on art. Between films, he would give lecture tours on art, and he had a great collection of his own.
Right down here.
Yes, Tim mentioned it, and you mentioned that you were influenced somewhat by Bergman and Bava, and House of Usher was such a departure for you going into Gothic and color. I was just wondering if any influence from Hammer Films was noticed by you.
Tim,
No.
would you repeat that?
Okay.
Yes, he asked to what extent Hammer Films had been an influence on Rodgers' work.
I hadn't seen the Hammer films at that time. I saw them later on, and as a matter of fact, on Tomb of Lygia, my cameraman was Arthur Grant, who had been a cameraman on some of the Hammer films.
We're going to allow one more question. Don't forget, we have Roger again tomorrow night, so don't be too disappointed. Back there.
Some of my favorite moments with Vincent ever was when we worked with Peter Lorre. Do you have any, what was it like to work with those two? There were any funny stories or anything?
He wants to know what it was like to work specifically between Vincent and Peter Lorre, what that rapport was like.
Working with Vincent and Peter was great, and it helped to stimulate the later films where I felt, as I say, that I was beginning to repeat myself, because Peter could improvise wonderfully, and Vincent would stay right with him. I remember on The Raven, in the very first scene, for some reason in all the Poe films, he always seemed to have ancestors buried in the crypt beneath the house. They were never in the graveyard. And Peter is asking Vincent, I forgot the scene exactly, something about his late wife or something like that. And Peter said, she's buried in the crypt beneath the house. And Peter says, where else?
I'm afraid we're going to have to draw the line there. We really appreciate Mr. Corman's time. He'll be back tomorrow.